I was in Washington, D.C. from the age of 7. I did not start studying dance until 14. Until that time, I had done almost nothing physical. I had sat on my butt and read books, or I had drawn pictures. But a friend of mine recovering from asthma decided to start studying ballet with the Marion Venables School. And for some reason or other, I decided to start doing it also. I had never seen any ballet at that time. Maybe one performance of the Washington School, A Christmas Cinderella. But I got immediately entranced by it and went on studying with great enthusiasm, devotion, and zeal, and went on doing it, and went on doing it, and went on doing it. Now, the dance community at that time in Washington was, of course, very small and very divided and had no money.
When was this?
1949. The Marion Venables studio was at Connecticut and M Street in a townhouse which she probably owned. The studio was built out in the back. There was the one studio. The tiny little studio in the front for tap and Spanish classes. Miss Venable's background I know not much about. I researched it later on without a great deal of success, but the story is, as far as I know, she had studied. She came from Colorado and studied in Chicago with Adolf Bohm. She may have studied with Luigi Albertieri. Everybody in the 30s and 40s studied with Bohm and Albertieri, one or the other, or both. Those are the two master teachers in the ballet tradition at that time in the United States. Miss Venable was a highly theatrical woman, very dramatic looking, with great gray blue eyes and a strong manner. She was a naturally very fine teacher, but something or other, she did not get good basics from either of these men, even from Albertieri. Therefore, the better she taught, the worse the results were, technically speaking. But her students had a dramatic flair and quality that was very strong. Well, she decided to get married. And she brought into the studio 2 Russians from England, John Sergeyev-Wells and Nina Nikitina. They had come from England with Mona Inglesby's Ballet International, a very well-regarded company at the time. Madame Nikitina had been in the class at the Mariinsky with Alexander Danilova. Mr. Sergeyev's background is a little more obscure. I have to get hold of his son Nikita and question him very strongly about all that because it's a little obscure how he got out of Russia. The rumor was that he got drunk in Paris and was dancing in a bar and somebody said we should go to ballet. He had been in the Tsarist army before that. Beyond that, I know nothing else about him, nor how he acquired that last name, hyphenated Sergeyev-Wells. But he had a very beautiful bod, slim waist, and gorgeous feet. And he wound up in the Anna Pavlova company with Madame Nina, who had also been with Diaghilev, and they were with the Chauve-souris, and they were here and there, all over the place in Europe. Typical Russians with absolutely no business sense whatsoever. Came over here because the idea was Miss Bettmann was going to sell them the studio. This did not work out very well. There was a tiny little company connected with the studio. A not professional company, the best dancers you could get in Washington at the time. That meant the girls were pretty good, the boys were lousy, but it was all you could get. One of them was Bill Garner. And a fellow by the name of Walter Stroud. And a wooden Indian by the name of George Cernick. And they did little performances, and Mr. Sergeyev began creating ballets for them. He was a remarkable man. Where he got the talents he had, I do not know. He was, even for that time, a dated choreographer. It was old-fashioned work, but charming. And I sat on the bench and watched those rehearsals day after day after day after day after day. I was not good enough to be in the company, never mind. I was there. As often as they were, I was there. And he recreated one of Anna Pavlova's ballets called Autumn Leaves. He called it Autumn Illusions. And according to a story I heard when it was first put on, Lisa Gardner walked out in distress saying it was simply dreadful. It was not the Anna Pavlova ballet. Nonetheless, it had many of those qualities, and he used the same music, Chopin. He also created a delightful ballet to the music of the Bettmann, and that taught those kids an immense amount about European character dancing. He was a superb character dancer. When I went to New York and studied at the Met, I found that Sergeyev was a finer character teacher than York Wazowski. He had those kids really moving, and in that generation, turned into teachers in the Washington area. Phyllis Blake, a woman who went finally to Cambridge, Maryland, by the name of Betty Wright, Betty Wright, forget her married name. A friend of mine, Phyllis Carter Daw, gorgeous teacher. She taught at the Washington School for a while. Many people went through dance. Louise Hessler taught for years in the Silver Spring area and was my first teacher. She was primarily a tap and character dancer, but all of these people had the benefit of working with these two people. And they taught there for several years, and all of a sudden, the marriage did not work out, and Ms. Venable came back and found that these teachers were better than she. So I renounced. But I went on studying with them, and I also went for a year to the Washington School of Ballet because according to their contract, we were not allowed to teach in Washington for a year. So they lived across the street from me, above Larimer's Delicatessen, because I lived across the street. And I
Where was that?
Connecticut S, right above DuPont Circle. And for a time, Ms. Venable had another studio in that brick building that sits at an angle when you come down the hill. Big brick building, I forget what's in it now, some sort of professional teachers organization there for a while. She had another studio across the street from there, which that was the year I was at Central High and got a D in geometry, because I got the mumps and because I was spending all my time watching classes when I wasn't taking classes, because I could look out my bedroom window and see them out there. So I would watch her walk across the street. We also had a fascinating pianist, a Sicilian fellow from New York, Joe Lantieri. His brother was a tap dancer on Broadway, Al Lanti. And Joe was a marvelous pianist and very creative, and he helped us a great deal in learning music in relation to ballet, because Miss Venable would say, Joe, don't play Debussy, it's much too difficult. And then they would rush up to him after class and say, Joe, what did you play? He said, Debussy. You know, that kind of thing, with a cigarette and spectacles.
Judith, I know you have years of stories.
So
and we
anyhow,
need to get them, but we also need to let
move on.
everybody else.
So anyway, I went on from there to the Met, where I studied, and had just gone over into the hands of the Cicchetti people. And I studied under the great maestro Alfredo Golino, who had just begun his teaching career, the most exquisite, courteous gentleman and fine teacher ever. Tutor in Krask, and Matt Gavers. And I studied Cicchetti ballet there. Big, tall, gawky fellow in the back row. We wondered why he was there. He knew why he was there. Paul Taylor. Remy Charlotte, Carolyn Brown in the advanced class, all of that kind of thing. And it was very difficult in New York at that time. Nobody had any money. I didn't have any money. I got anemia. It was before the anorexia. Anorexia was just starting then. But nonetheless, I wasn't eating right, and I was working too hard. And working in another. I gave up the whole thing. I got married. I quit. I moved down to Atlanta. Studied at Atlanta Ballet for a while. With my nose in the air from New York, I discovered Atlanta Ballet was one of the best studios in the country. And then I came back here to Washington, and ultimately I went to AU and got my master's in dance history. I've taught, I've done my Cicchetti certification up to the old intermediate grade, and patati et patata, that's that.
We are going to have to program the break later, because you are a walking history of ballet, the evolution that has
In
happened
Washington.
in Washington. Yeah.
By the way, we didn't speak to the ballet, we didn't speak to the modern dancers, and they didn't speak to us.
That's the way it was in New
At
York
that
also.
time.
Yeah.
Except at Met, with the first influx with Brown and all those people from the country.
And I never mentioned your last name. Judith
Judson
Judson.
of Black Hill. Adoniram Judson of Judson Memorial Church being the collateral ancestor line. And when I first saw the photographs of Yvonne Rayner with a ribbon around her neck on the altar, I held my sides laughing because I thought old Adoniram would have had a fit.
Well, we thank Al Carmine for that. He was a pastor that was so supportive of dads at Judson Church.